Martin Street, Brad Street, no civic address assigned. To whom it may concern, our names are David and Karen Legrelli, and we reside at 15 Martin Street, where we have built and lived in our home for 33 years. We oppose the rezoning application to change the above property from recreation and green space to residential and would like to purchase this property to leave it as a green space. Rezoning this property would increase the street traffic on Martin Street, as access to the property would be from our street. This area has already been a high drug traffic area for years, and putting a guardrail in at the access from Martin Street has slowed it down, but if we purchase this property, we would restrict access at the end of Brad Street completely, impeding drug sales even more. The property borders ours and More Services Inc. home. The clients of More Services enjoy and spend a lot of time in their backyard. There is one client in particular that the backyard is his sanctuary. With this new development, the trees would be removed, exposing him to everyone, which would cause torment. This would take away his sanctuary and be detrimental to his health and well-being. There has also been sufficient development in this neighborhood and surrounding areas with numerous single-dwelling Miramichi housing homes and more recently apartments and duplexes at the bottom of McIntosh Street and top of Mel Hayes Avenue. There are plenty of more spacious and appropriate properties to consider developing. We ask you to please consider our proposal and accept this letter as our opposition to the rezoning of this property and look forward to hearing from you. Sincerely, David and Karen Legrelli.
There we go.
If you don't mind, please start by introducing yourselves.
I'm David Legrelli.
And I'm Karen Legrelli. We are the homeowners that wrote the objection/proposal letter for this property on Brad Martin Street.
The reason we want to purchase it is it was in our letter. We've been living there 33 years, and these are the best neighbors, and this is their sanctuary, and I don't want to take it away.
The More Services home was there when we built our home 33 years ago. There is still some long-term residents there that have been there as long as we have, and they become like your family. So they have nobody to advocate for them, so we are advocating for them.
Thank you.
Thank you. Would anyone else also like to address council? If anyone else who's here this evening?
I'm Ashley McDonald, by the way. I just want to add to Karen and David's, the area is also in my backyard. I live on Mel Hayes Avenue, and I work for More Services, and I have for 9 years. So I agree to what they're saying is that's their home. And it's supposed to be kept private. And by opening up that area, it's opening up everything that shouldn't be released to the public. So I asked for them to also not allow Karen and David to purchase the land or just leave it as it is. Thank you.
Thank you. I would just note that tonight, I guess the hearing is in regard to the rezoning specifically. The offer or request to purchase will be facilitated through a separate process. I believe the clerk will follow up with you on that regarding the purchase. Regarding the rezoning, the proposed rezoning, we do now move to, is there anyone else who would like to speak? Okay. So then we now move to questions, if any, from members of council. Councillor Ross Robinson.
There we go. Thank you, Your Worship. I just have one question. I don't know if it's to the manager or to Mr. Odette, and maybe I'm way out in left field here, but I've always believed, or was led to believe, or thought that when there's a subdivision, it's a minimum standard to have a green space. And when you look at the map of this area, it's very densely populated. It is the only green space. And I just don't understand how, if that is a minimum standard, how we can take that away.
Mr. Odette, I see you've,
Sure, yeah, I can take that one. Yes, it is a minimum standard when creating a new subdivision of land in the city, whether it's 2 lots or 200 lots. You need land for public purposes dedication. I believe there's a percentage of land, I don't have the bylaw in front of me, but it is taken from the city's subdivision bylaw. But I also believe there's under that bylaw, you can also make a contribution to the city, like monetary contribution in lieu of providing that. It would have to be negotiated with the city if there was a new subdivision, but essentially that's what we're looking at here. It's a piece of land that would have been given to the city as a result of the larger subdivision taking place here. Yeah.
Follow up?
it's still to you, yeah.
So we're breaking our own rules?
Maybe I can do a supplement to what Mr. Odette said. As he said, the bylaw requires a developer to provide either land or funds to the city. If they choose to provide funds, those funds have to be used to purchase land for public use, not necessarily in that neighborhood, but the idea is for all your development, to have land for public use, ideally close to the developments that give it up. The rules on changing that, it's not really a matter of zoning, it's a matter of selling, and the city cannot sell any of the land that's been designated for public use without the consent of PRAC. So if you decide that you're going to sell this property to anybody for any use, it has to go to PRAC for consent, no sale. Even with a consent, it's up to council to decide whether the best use of the property is to continue public use or to have a private development. Nobody's breaking the laws, I guess, is the easiest way.
And so one final, if I may. Are there any considerations taken for our climate change adaptation plan where, it's important that we maintain our green spaces and have those canopies? So is that a consideration?
That wasn't examined as part of the staff review on this proposal. The property being fairly small and, very proximate to other recreational spaces in the city, I don't see it being a significant issue, but that's certainly a factor, yes.
Couple of questions from the chair. I guess I already addressed the component of the purpose, the request to potentially purchase the property and directing that to the clerk. I would just note in the letter, not necessarily related specifically to the proposed rezoning, but there were references to drug sales in the area, and I would ask if the clerk could forward the letter to the police department as well, so that they could be made aware of that for the purposes of attempting to stop those activities regardless. My question, Mr. Odette, or again to whoever it would go to, is in the map that we have on page 3 of the slide printout, it shows that there's a street going through the property. So I guess maybe if you could, is that indeed a street? Because I guess to me that would obviously render it not available to have development on it if there's actually a street running through the middle of it. Oh, I guess to Director Shanahan or Mr. Odette or whoever would like to speak to that.
Yeah, it's not officially a street, it's just a piece of property owned by the developer of Brad Street. The owner is not identified as a city street.
Okay, and I guess my second question probably is to Mr. Odette, but again, when we look at this broader exercise, I think the purpose from my perspective was to rezone larger pieces of property for R4 development to get the much needed, multi-unit apartment buildings in our community that we desperately need. This one has always been a bit of an odd duckling as it relates to the other ones. And I'm just wondering, because I am familiar with this area and this property, and in full disclosure, some of these folks are my members of my family, although it is not a conflict. The manager has told me that. It's not very big. And so have we actually validated that the zoning regulations, like, could it be viably having any development on it? Because it's not very big. So the zoning, you said in the last presentation, the zoning regulations actually would dictate what can and can't happen. So even if it was rezoned, is it viable to actually develop on this property?
Yeah, I think you raise a good point, and with this property, like you said, it's a bit of an odd duck, and it is just under half an acre though. And when we look at the permitted uses under the R2 zone, realistically, the biggest development you'd see here is a duplex or a triplex, which could certainly fit on a 1,900 square meter piece of land. With the exception of the driveway area, which would go down to Martin Street, which is quite narrow, like I noted, which is only about 10 or 12 feet. The rest of the property is quite typical of a larger building lot in the city, in a subdivision, so I see absolutely no issues with developing on it, other than the fact that the driveway access would be quite narrow, getting to the street.
Thank you. Councillor King.
Thank you, Your Worship. On that, Your Worship, on the people that are looking maybe to buy it, do they have to apply or send a letter to Pratt, or does it come through council?
There was an inquiry, we thought it would go because these properties are marketed for housing by the Department of Economic Development, and we determined because of the use, the people that are inquiring about buying it are do not want to build on it. We've directed that they be told to send a proposal to the clerk's office, and that we bring it to council through the clerk's office. So ECDEV is only selling land for people that want to put houses on them. This is not what these buyers want to do, so we've directed them through the clerk.
Another one, Your Worship, if I
Yep.
may. Just to carry on, Councillor Ross Robinson talked about, we need there has to be a green space. Is that true or false? There has to be a green space for every area.
There has
in
to
the city.
be, at the end of the day, there has to be green space allocated, but there's nothing to stop council from selling that green space. So I guess the short answer is, to create the subdivision, you have to create green space. You don't have to keep the green space. It's the easiest way.
I believe too, and maybe the manager could speak to this, in this, like, the process of having identified these properties that were coming forward to be pre-zoned for development, and again, this one being noticeably different from everything else, I believe those properties that were reviewed and considered were from a property surplus list. So I think at a certain point, somehow, outside of this process, this was deemed surplus city property, even though it is zoned green space. So someone else within the community, the city, has previously determined this property as surplus, which means that I think that would open the door for a potential sale, regardless of if a rezoning happens. Is it?
Yeah, no, that's correct.
Deputy Mayor Quinn.
Thank you, Your Worship. My questions have been asked by my colleagues, so I'm satisfied with those answers with respect to the rezoning of said property and why we are having this public hearing tonight. But I'll take every opportunity I can to encourage and thank David and Karen. Excuse me, I should be more formal. Mr. and Mrs. LaGraley here as they highlight the drug traffic. We need to know that. Thank you for highlighting that. It is incumbent upon us to share that information with Mayor Michie Police Force, and I would encourage any citizens who are listening in or sitting in the gallery here this evening to do so. We need to know that, and thank you for highlighting that through this process.
And I guess one final comment from me too, I think to connect the dot of my previous comment is, I think to Councillor Ross Robinson's point, perhaps we should revisit the concept of this property even being declared surplus in the first place. Perhaps it should remain designated as green space. So maybe that's something that we could consider as well. Councillor Summers.
Thank you, Your Worship. Like Deputy Mayor Quinn highlighted, I appreciate all the questions from fellow members of council. My question, Mr. Odette, is basically a technicality on that proposed access, I guess I'll call it. I feel like I should know this already, but I don't. Is there a minimum requirement for an access in this type of situation? Because 10 to 12 feet, or even just looking at it on my map here, seems incredibly small. Like, is there a minimum requirement?
Right, yeah. So there's two different things that would come into play. The first one being that if you're creating a new lot within the R2 zone, if you're subdividing a new lot, you need to have 18 meters of road frontage on a public road. In this case, I think, what I say, 3.5 meters, so very, very small. Existing lots, however, though, the zoning bylaw does make provision that any existing lot can be used as is, as long as the use is permitted within the zone and meets all other standards. So that means if you have a funky lot like this, or some other size, undersized lot, you can still use it as long as the use is permitted in the zone. Second thing would be that there is when you're looking at the literal physical driveway size, there is a maximum requirement under the zoning bylaw. I don't believe there's a minimum, though. Yeah.
Thank you, Councillor. Seeing no further lights for comments or questions, I will review the next steps in the process. Comments made tonight will be considered by council moving forward. Only those councillors who are in attendance at this public hearing shall be entitled to vote on third reading and enactment, and council will determine at the special council meeting on November 5th, 2024, whether to give second reading by title, reading in entirety, third reading by title, and enactment of bylaw number 109-24 and 110-36. There being no further business, the meeting is adjourned.